Hello and welcome. I think it's a bit of a heat wave. It's 10:29 a.m. so that's nowhere near the hottest part of the day, and it's already quite warm. One or a couple of comments relating to the use of, one mentions Facebook and the other two don't mention the use of social media particularly, but I think by the nature of those inquiries it is related. So I'll jump to that first, not wanting to get ahead and skip too many of the comments I haven't covered yet, but in order to keep it topical. Now, I don't receive the news or watch the news intentionally, and if you have a relatively limited use of the internet, Google search, or what you do, as you will all know more than myself, is quite restricted in the content you search for, then you don't really get inundated with other stuff, even that which could be relevant to you. So as a monk living abroad, I don't keep in touch with the news at home, but someone brought to my attention that things were happening at the moment in the UK and made a comment with regards to that. So I did look, and there are various riots going on. Now, in my lifetime, I've recently reached the grand old age of 57. This is by no means a new thing. They've been going on all of my lifetime in the UK. They have names. Not to make light of that, it's still very serious. But what is different now, of course, is that the dissemination of this news and then the adding of fuel to those fires is so much more exacerbated by the use of social media by way of communication. And there was a time when everything had to be planned way in advance and very carefully coordinated, and now of course people can be in contact with many people all at the same time. Now, whether this kind of abuse is going on online or in physical reality, it can be just as harmful, just as detrimental. And it is up to the relevant authorities to take care of these situations and within the law deal with them as they see fit. Now, I don't get involved in conversations or debates with regards to these goings on. They've been happening all over the world, and as I say, in my own country, throughout history, forever, as far as recorded history goes. But now, of course, we hear more easily about what might be going on in Bangladesh recently and now in the UK, and also with regards to all the wars and things going on. But on the other side of that, there is this use of social media that someone has brought to my attention with regards to their practice and their own use of it, saying they've managed to isolate themselves so much from people as far as their family is concerned, being that they have died and pets, and have virtually no one that they know anymore. And whilst this has enabled them to practice well, they have no community. And they mention that also someone mentioned recently in these comments that Buddhist communities are very far from welcoming. So I found myself on Facebook again. So I'm not sure about that. I'm not a member or haven't joined any Buddhist communities online. In fact, my own community is some distance away in India, and I have no contact with them because I don't feel the need for this continued updating and contact. Having renounced worldly life, samsara, and found the way forward to become free from suffering in this lifetime is to detach, to find disenchantment, as this subscriber goes on to ask me about in a minute, in those social connections, by way of developing a practice that gives you, in fact, more contact with more beings by means of developing the Brahma Viharas of metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, joy for others. Also in there is upekkha, equanimity. But these first three are very much with regards to others, other beings. The fourth with regards to our own nature, equanimous, unreactive, but caring still, and able to act when appropriate to do so, but appropriately and in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, the subscriber writing's problem is they have found themselves reverting back to Facebook for this contact they are missing. Now, this is of course because they're not finding the contact within their practice, within themselves, with the loving kindness that should begin firstly with yourself. We have to develop the ability to love ourselves before we can love others. Now, this isn't a rose-tinted glasses, peace and love, fluffy kind of emotion, but more just caring as to what needs to be done whilst you're sitting here, not doing anything other than observing a meditation object. It isn't inert or impotent in that sense that you're doing nothing. You're developing this ability to still care, but with wisdom, panya. Wisdom, that is, that you also know that samsara is, as the Buddha has taught us, suffering. And what we're looking to attain is freedom from that suffering by recognizing and establishing and eradicating its cause. As simple as that. We have to begin that process with ourselves and ourselves only. One doesn't have to completely isolate oneself from the world, but can be guarded and selective about how and what you give your attention to. Now, I'm afraid I'm rather ignorant as to how social media works exactly, because other than this platform, forum, I have no other means of socializing through the media, if that is what it is. Even with regards to these comments, I get very concerned if I have to look at the comments in reply to comments, and in fact don't do that, because they can lead one down a rabbit hole or off at a tangent from the subject matter and get into argument, into debate, into discussion. And I'm not here on this platform to convince, to change anyone's minds, to sell anything, to seek approval. No, I'm just sharing my experience of putting into practice what the Buddha teaches us, or the Buddha's teachings are there for us all to come to understand and put into practice ourselves, to experientially see for ourselves the results of that practice, which is peace and calm. Now, being that this is a form of social media, that I am discussing something with you through the media, it falls into that category. But I hope it isn't fueling greed, fueling hatred, fueling delusion. And even if you're not listening word for word and taking it in and absorbing it intellectually, which you don't need to, it has a more calming effect on your heart, on your very being. It doesn't fire you up. Even if it's boring and sends you to sleep, it is better than that, the alternative of firing you up and getting you into argument and debate. So when I see chains and links amongst yourselves of this form of argument, then it's a little bit worrying. But it doesn't happen very much at all. It's very, very, very insignificant. And that could be maybe why you refer to Buddhist communities, and I assume you mean online, but you could apply this to real life communities, living communities also, are a little unwelcoming. Only because they are avoiding this lovely word we call sampapalapa, this Pali word for useless talk, idle chit-chat, which can also include and have a part of it divisive talk, which is this debating but more or less constructive, so argumentative kind of discussion that can go on in many groups and forums. Now, looking at that, and you ask the question, after describing your experience in some detail, having returned to Facebook how much it has fired you up, you have answered the question that you're asking, how to become disenchanted with such things as social media, including this one, Facebook. You wouldn't be asking the question if you hadn't realized and already become disenchanted with it. About me talking about, would I please talk about how to cultivate disenchantment? You have done so. You're asking that question. So to some degree, you're disenchanted with it. The next step is, because you ask when I know it's completely unsatisfying, yet I'm repeating the pattern, is to understand the cause of why you go back. It is really getting to know these 12 steps of dependent origination, but they are really quite complicated to deeply understand, however useful, because they are a more detailed view of the Four Noble Truths. Now you know that Facebook is causing you suffering, so what is the cause of that suffering? There has to be a cause. You're identifying Facebook, but it isn't that, it's the desire to go back to this community, to face these rabbit holes of discussion that aren't generating peace and calm. Even there may be religious such groups directed at promoting peace and calm. But amongst those attendees, there could be debate. So if one has lost the view, the right view, that in the Noble Eightfold Path we have right speech, which in the Noble Eightfold Path, as opposed to the precepts, the fourth precept is not to lie, and just that. In the Noble Eightfold Path, so the fourth of the Four Noble Truths is the path leading to the end of suffering, and the third step is the wrong word, because it's not steps, they're they're links, and it's a circular chain, because the overall practice of the Noble Eightfold Path leads us to right view, and right view assists us with the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. But in the third link of that chain, right speech, one learns that one shouldn't use divisive speech or speak of useless things that aren't helpful particularly. It includes not lying. In all of our daily activities, actions of body, speech and mind, if we direct our thoughts to the Noble Eightfold Path and its constituent parts, they are very clear instructions as to how to behave, what to do. And that will prevent you returning to those particular forums. So if you really understand the Noble Eightfold Path, you can probably justify allowing yourself to listen to Dharma talks from monks you have become familiar with, or nuns, or teachers, or from groups of those in monasteries that are online with a presence on YouTube or likewise, and listen to those Dharma talks. If at the end of that they're not having the desired effect of bringing you some form of clarity and peace and calm, then you need to choose from the many others that are available until you find ones that are compatible with that right view and with yourself. And we're all different. We didn't at school all like the same teacher. Okay, some were more popular than others, but certain pupils would have an affinity with certain teachers. As we do in life, we don't all like the same people. It wouldn't work well. But then if you find yourself going back to Facebook and it causing you harm, disturbing your mind, not helping, then you make a note of that. If you must, literally make a note of that. Write it on your wall, on your hand, on your fridge, saying, don't look at Facebook. Better still, turn it off. Delete the account. Before I seriously started practicing, I had a Facebook account, but not for very long, and I deleted it. And that doesn't happen right away. It takes a year or so, I think, for it to go away. But it's gone. You don't have access to it. And I think it was one of the best things I did, because it was always tempting in that it was there to just look and see what people are talking about and really what they're thinking and what they're doing. But why do you need to? Now, it's not that I don't care what's happening in the rest of the world. It's that I can't really do much about it. These things will always be going on. And in fact, going to one of the most recent comments, if I can find it, yes, it says here, "Dear Bhante, your country is on fire. What can be done to extinguish the flames of violence and hate that are rampaging across England right now?" So I think that comes almost directly from one of the insensitive headlines that one gets as soon as you search for UK riots, that comes up in the news headlines, which are there to provoke or gain attention. Like the titles of these talks, one tries to make them catch someone's eye, catch someone's attention, to draw them in. Not for commercial reasons, but just to hope someone might pick up a little Dharma. So in this case, out of compassion. But for the same reasons, commercially, people want to attract attention, draw people in. I know what they call it, clickbait, isn't it, or something, to make people click on that thing. A nice picture or lots of fire, and these headlines bring people in to watch. Now, you need to keep abreast of the news and know what's going on, indeed. But you don't have to watch it continually. And what can be done? Well, you step back and don't involve yourself in the argument. And the best way currently to do this is you can not be on social media talking about it. Even if you take a break, this will slow the fueling of the fires that keep the momentum of these things going. But naturally, already since receiving that comment and before making this video, I would imagine the situation has already calmed, and I hope it has. These things tend to blow up and then cool down and go away again, arise and pass away. What can be done about suffering in the world in general? Why is it, someone is asking, why is it, and I don't know whether I can find the question, I'll just try and remember it. Why is it important to look at this, they say, this thing called karma, when seemingly throughout history, nature has continued to propagate violence, and through political and economical issues in all countries throughout the world, seemingly forever, which is what I always say. It's always been like this. Nothing's changed. This is suffering. Well, this is because the cause of suffering is greed, hatred, and delusion. This is why. But we cannot collectively change. There is no such thing as group karma, collective karma. We are responsible for our own individual actions of body, speech, and mind. Karma is what we call it. Collectively, if we all keep moral virtue, follow the Noble Eightfold Path, but primarily in this sense, keeping sila, moral virtue, keeping the precepts, we are all refraining from creating negative karma. So therefore, collectively, we are all preventing the continuation of these terrible situations. But only as individuals, as part of that group, can we have any sense of changing or change. Because even to change our own acts of behavior in terms of body, speech and mind is very difficult. We follow the teachings as set out in the Noble Eightfold Path to the letter. And then we do make a huge change in ourselves. And setting by way of example something for others to follow. You don't need to paste that on Facebook or anything else. It will become known. And the more that do that, the more it becomes known. But possibly never so much as negative information. If someone complains in a restaurant, one person complains in a restaurant, it can have a hugely devastating impact on that particular establishment's business. Whereas if 100 people say how wonderful it is, it may go unnoticed. News headlines, what grabs the attention? Everything's really peaceful in London today. Oh, Birmingham, it's so serene. Nothing's happening with the weather in the UK. It's neither hot, it's neither cold. I mean, that's not going to attract a lot of clicking, is it? Or attention. Bad news sells. Remember that. Bad news sells. Buddhism isn't trying to sell anything, and it's only good news. So, the good news is there is something you can do. And that is just practice. Practice sila, keep your own precepts, without worrying about what everyone else is doing. They are responsible for their karma, the heirs to their karma. Practice meditation. This will help you develop equanimity within yourself. And then you're more readily able to give loving kindness, metta, to have compassion, karuna, and to see the pleasure in other people's success, mudita. And develop wisdom through this practice alone will help you see and gain right view. What we consider the first or the beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path, of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and things being out of our control, but also of karma, and that time and time again these things happen both within our lifetimes and brought forward from previous lifetimes, and into the future, the next. You will, if you restrict, if you guard what you're using your devices for, like in the same way we can guard what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch, and what we think about. We can have PG, parental guidance, on all of those senses, even what we're thinking about, if we're keeping sila, if we're keeping the 5 precepts, no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying or taking intoxicants. In other words, if we take that in as one, do no harm. No harm. And this means either to yourself or to others. In any respect, do no harm at all. Refrain from harming any living being, including yourself. This is the greatest parental guidance, restrictive covenant, whatever you want to call it, over what you are experiencing. And although perhaps smartphones, and arguably but rightly so, get considerable criticism when seen in the hands of monks or nuns or serious practitioners using these devices, because they can be a very relevant form of entertainment in this day and age, and are so, and also a negative and destructive form of communication. Although that is the case, the phrase, the pen is mightier than the sword, predates the smartphone for a very long, long time. Because from the day we were able to communicate in writing with a pen, it proved more devastating than even that a sword can bring upon another being. And in that way, with right speech, it is often heard the simile that the tongue is like a sharp axe. When brought down upon someone, the devastation is immense, but no more so than that of the tongue, and it cannot be taken back. And in writing, it's there for more to hear, see, in the first instance, unchanged, unforgotten. But our own sense of moral virtue, sila, those 5 precepts, and that knowledge that we wish to refrain from harming, keeping that do no harm foremost in our minds, helps us guard, whether we're on social media or whether we're walking around the library. what we choose to read in the library, what we choose to study, or what we choose to look at on our smartphones, or walking down the high street, which shop windows we spend a little bit more time looking in, or maybe we're looking at the reflection of ourselves. This is where we can guard, protect with the sila, using it as our suit of armour, our shield, from what is going on, but making us better able to help, to listen, to receive others, and point them in the right, without preaching, without teaching, but show them how they too can become more peaceful, more calm, rather than stirring themselves up with all of this sampapalapa, as I mentioned earlier. So someone had a dilemma with regards to the Facebook situation, and I hope I've covered that, and you might find that useful or not. But you don't need it. You can, if it's part of a communication or a structure that you need in business, you can compartmentalize areas, I would imagine, of social media, because I know that some Buddhist organizations perhaps have Facebook accounts that their lay followers can keep in communication with, or WhatsApp groups, or Line groups, or such like that, to aid communication. But as an individual practitioner, you only need to be involved in what you feel is essential for purposes of communication, in order that you can free all of that wasted time up for the dedication of practice of sila, samadhi and panya, and without that extra added distraction, that sixth hindrance. It isn't really a sixth hindrance, the smartphone or all that's connected with it, social media, computers and so on and so forth, because it is just no different, it's no more of a hindrance. It still comes under sensual desire, wanting to have these communities of friendship, friends, wanting social interaction. It's the hindrance of sensual desire, and can be, when it is fueled through such platforms, hatred also, and is certainly delusion, if that's where you think you'll find the answers. How often when we really want a simple answer online, and I've done this, especially living abroad, you Google a simple question, does a simple answer often come up? No, usually you have to plough through all of the different debates and arguments over this issue, rather than it takes a little while to get to the simple truth. And this is what how I describe and how I look at everything, bringing everything down back to the lowest common denominator, the source. And that is the beauty of the Four Noble Truths. They're always there as the lowest common denominator, the source. Even putting the Noble Eightfold Path at the end of that aside, but just seeing, well, there's suffering. Of course there is. This is the Four Noble Truths. But there can be, and there is, the end of suffering. But unless you continue with the practice, suffering recurs. It's cyclical like that. But it's just that, and doesn't need to be disturbing when understood, and can be treated with equanimity in yourself and not affect your practice. And, well, what can be done? I hope by now those fires have died down. People have got something else to talk about on social media. But we must remember and remain equanimous and know that these things will always go on, unfortunately. Not just in the UK, but everywhere. On that note, I think I will leave it there. I hope there's something useful that you can use or share wisely. Share it on Facebook. Yeah, go on. That's okay. If you think it'll help people calm down listening to this kind of thing, or anything else you find that's calming, then share that. That's okay. But then don't argue about it. Say what I always say now at the end of this. If it's useful, then good, cool. Use it, share it. If not, just let it go. Don't worry about it. Hate it if you wish. Put it down. Don't let it affect you anymore. But please come back again. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.